Good noon to all. I am Mrs. Rima Kuwar, Assistant Professor, Department of Pharmaceutics, Sir Dr. M.S. Gosavi, College of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, Nasik. Welcome you all to second session of one-day national level webinar on emerging trends in co-processed excipients and architecting dosage form by organized by the Department of Pharmaceutics under the aegis of Internal Quality Assurance Cell, Sir Dr. M.S. Gosavi, College of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, Nasik. For this session, we have guest speaker with us, Dr. Sita V G, Assistant Manager Technical Services, IMCD India Private Limited, Mumbai. It's my great privilege to introduce you all to our second session speaker, Dr. Sita V G. Ma'am has completed her PhD in pharmaceutical technology from Institute of Chemical Technology. Her topic of PhD research was lipidic nanocarriers as a drug delivery system. She has completed her postgraduate diploma in business management from NMI MS Mumbai. She has completed her master's in pharmaceutics from VES College of Pharmacy, Mumbai University. She has done her B Pharm from SVKM's BNCP College of BMCP, Mumbai. Regarding her professional experience, she is currently working as Assistant Manager Technical Services, IMCD India Private Limited, Mumbai. She also has a research associate experience from micro labs. She has four publications, research publications published, and one book chapter published. She also applied for four Indian patents. Now I request Dr. Sita Vijay ma'am to deliver her talk on topic co-processed excipients. Please ma'am, kindly deliver your talk on this topic.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. I will just share my screen and take over. Yeah. Can you please confirm if my slides are visible? Are my slides visible?
Yes,
Can you see my
yes,
slides?
ma'am. Yes.
Perfect, perfect. So, good afternoon, everybody. It's a wonderful afternoon today, and thank you very much for joining. This particular topic is very interesting. So, we know about excipients and how excipients are the core of any formulation development. Of course, API is something that is essential, but without excipients, again, we don't see a delivery system actually giving its efficacy or performing its efficacy. These days numerous discussions are on bioavailability enhancement, and excipients are at the forefront how the bioavailability of any dosage form, the efficacy of any dosage form can be enhanced or can be making complete. So, with that, I will have a very, very brief introduction on the contents on the agenda of what we're going to talk today. The topic today is co-processed excipients. So, what are these co-processed excipients, and what is the need of these co-processed excipients? What are the advantages and limitations from the conventional excipients, and what are the regulatory and the future perspective that we see? So before that, just an introduction about IMCD. I am a part, I am the technical services of IMCD India, which is a part of the IMCD Global. Now, IMCD is a company that is a leading distributor in excipients, in specialty chemicals. And we are, present over in more than 50 countries in 6 continents. So with that, touching upon what is this excipient? Excipients have a huge impact on formulation development, as we are saying that the selection of excipient becomes very, very important if you need to have a complete, a bioavailable and efficacious and a stable formulation. Now, these selection of excipients would depend on the type of API, the properties of the API, the process that you are selecting to develop your formulation. What is the target formulation? Is it a liquid formulation? Is it a solid formulation? Solid, mein, is it a tablet? Is it a capsule? and the potential impact on the formulation. Is your formulation for the stomach? Is your formulation a topical formulation? Is your formulation a systemic formulation? Now, the ideal characteristics of an excipient should be that it should be chemically stable and non-reactive. Of course, it should not react with your API. It should be stable in the final formulation. It should be inert to the human body, because every tablet, every capsule that we have excipients, and those excipients should be inert to our human body. The organoleptic properties like the touch, the feel, the smell, it has to be neutral, easy to process and cost effective, physically and chemically suitable to the dosage form, and majorly it has to be regulatory approved. Now, what is the type, or on what basis will you select the right excipients? So, an example that I've taken here is oral solids, because we know the Indian market is dominant with oral solids. If I have to say, around 80 to 85% of the formulation that we have in the Indian market is oral solids, because of the convenience, because of the stability, because of its efficacy. So, what would be the parameter how you would select these excipients for oral solids? So one thing is the API dose. Now, if you have an API dose like a paracetamol of 500 mg, obviously you would need to choose excipients which are good in flow and which would give a good compaction. Or on the other side, if your API dose is very low, say around 2 mg, 5 mg, then definitely you would need an excipient that would, keep it in a uniform part, so that your content uniformity is not impacted. Secondly, your excipient selection will also be dependent on the particle size of the API. Your excipient and your API have to have a near about particle size, so that the flow properties and the segregation and there is uniformity. Next is flow properties. So depending on what kind of process that you select, are you going to go ahead with a direct compression? Are you going to go ahead with a dry granulation or a wet granulation? Depending on that, the excipient have to be selected. Then comes the bulk density, the hygroscopicity, and the compactability of these kind of excipients. Obviously, you need excipients which are not hygroscopic, so that your final formulation is stable. You need an excipient which is compactable, so that when it is put across with API, there is a good compaction and there is a good tabletability properties to your final formulation. So we know a lot of excipients that are available. Excipients have been the mainstay in the pharmaceutical formulation since ages and ages. Like we have lactose monohydrate, we have microcrystalline cellulose, we have certain binders like povidone. Then we have disintegrants or super disintegrants like sodium starch glycolate, cross povidone. Then we come to lubricant like magnesium stearate, a glidant like talc. Then we have silicas. So all of these are regular conventional excipients. Now, what are these co-processed excipients? So this is, I mean, as I was mentioning, this is a very interesting topic, because the era of excipient has shifted to the era of co-processed excipients. Why co-processed excipients? That is the very first question we have to ask. Why co-processed excipients? This is to reduce the complexity and to increase the functionality of these excipients. So that is how co-processed excipient actually came into picture. Now, the individual excipients, like suppose an example I have of an oral tablet, an oral solid tablet. Obviously, with API, you would have a binder like a lactose or a microcrystalline cellulose. There will be a binder, there will be a disintegrant, lubricant, fluid, solubilizer if that API requires or no. Now, including all of these different excipients becomes complicated. It becomes energy and labor intensive. So, what is the solution for this, and why co-process excipients comes into picture? Is to overcome these formulation challenges by enhancing the material performance and to significantly reduce the time for formulation so that it can quickly come into the market. That means, what are these co-processed excipients? These are excipients. These are these individual excipients physically blended with each other to form a co-processed excipient. So that means if we have to, see, these co-processed excipients may be a combination of a filler, binder, disintegrant. It may be a combination of a filler and a flow aid. It may be a combination of a filler, binder, disintegrant, and a lubricant. So the advantage of this co-processed is, if you have to formulate, suppose a paracetamol tablet, you would have the API, you would add the filler, you would mix it, then you would add a binder, then you will add a disintegrant, again mix it, then you will lubricate it with magnesium stearate, and then you will go into compression. So you have these individual excipients that you are adding, and you have this process that is happening multiple times to get you to the final blend of compression. But in co-processed excipient, if that particular co-processed excipient is a mix of a filler, of a binder, of a disintegrant, so what you will do is you will take your paracetamol 500 mg per tablet, you will add this co-processed excipient, just blend it once, lubricate it with magnesium stearate, and then take it ahead for compression. So significantly, the inventory that is required reduces, the time, the process that is required reduces, and that is how co-processed excipients have found a place in the market in the formulations today. Now this is a new topic. So for you, I mean, because you all are in the bachelors, because you all are we have certain master students, the faculty is present here. So this actually opens up a very good avenue for you to explore co-processed excipients in your minor small projects or for a master's project. So you could always do a comparison between the efficacy, the functionality, or the ease of formulation when you're using a co-processed excipients versus an individual excipient. So this could be a very good, a learning path for you as well. So I believe that this topic is very important, and it has come at a right time for you all to have this particular session. Now, what is the need of newer excipients? So we have all of these conventional excipients. Is there really a need for co-processed excipients? Let us check what is the need for newer excipients. So one thing is definitely the growing popularity of DC processes. Now we know that most of our formulations, most of the products that are formulated is by direct compression process. Again, because of the ease of the process, because of cost effectiveness, because of lesser involvement of other processes, as against wet granulation, dry granulation, spray drying, all of those. So now when there is growing popularity for DC process, you definitely need excipients that are suitable for direct compression. So direct compression, obviously you have a filler, binder, disintegrant. So the demand for the ideal filler binder increases. Increasing speed capabilities of tableting machineries. Previously there were tablet compressing machine with 50,000 rpm. Now the demand or the need for increasing the tableting capabilities have increased. So you have multi-punch, multi-station tableting machine, and the speed of tableting is also widely increased. So obviously you need excipients that will give you that robustness of tablets. There are certain shortcomings of the existing excipients which obviously we need to fulfill. The lack of excipients to address specific patient needs, like for example ODTs. If we have to formulate an orally disintegrating tablet, do we exactly know what kind of excipients we need for an ODT? Because ODT is a very very specific or a very specialized formulation wherein the disintegration has to be less than 30 seconds. At the same time, you need to have a good tablet hardness to pass your friability and to pass the packaging process, to pack the to pass the traveling or the transport process. So this particular difference of having lesser DT at the same time having good strength, good robustness, makes it challenging to formulate ODTs. So we are always in need or always in search of excipients that would actually cater to these functionalities in ODTs. And last, the growing excipient performance expectations. Obviously the market is so rapid. There is the latest example is COVID. So when COVID came, the entire research fraternity were bent into finding an app dosage form that the COVID patients could consume. So obviously the speed at which it had to be researched upon, the speed at which it had to be developed was very very high. Now obviously if you have a more convenient excipient, if you have a more functional excipient, the development time drastically reduces. So what are the different types of excipients available now in the system, and where does these co-processed excipients fit? So we have single chemical entity. So what are these single chemical entity? These are majorly the conventional excipients, like how we mentioned the lactose monohydrate, the microcrystalline cellulose, the silicas, the disintegrants like the sodium starch glycolate, cross povidone. So all of these single chemical entity, these conventional excipients are called as single chemical entity. Now there is another type of excipient called as a physical mixture or a blend of excipients. So what is this? This is basically a simple physical mixture of two or more excipients to maintain the shear processes where individual components are mixed together without a significant change. Like for example, if you have a diluent and if you have a disintegrant, you are simply mixing it and then taking it ahead for compression. So these are simple physical mixtures. The third are the new chemical entities. So these new chemical entities are, I would say, very, very rare. It takes a lot of years to research upon this new chemical entity. And even if it is approved, even if it comes into the market, it undergoes a lot of regulatory speculations, like whether is it safe, do you have the toxicity study, do you have the long term chronic and the acute toxicity study, is it safe for pulmonary delivery, is it safe for aerosol or lung delivery, is it safe for chronic administration, like maybe for hypertension, maybe for diabetes. So these kind of regulatory scrutiny definitely comes into picture when we are talking about new chemical entities. So these will definitely take a lot of time. Having said that, we do have new chemical entities or novel excipients present in the market, which of course over the years they are building up their place into the market. And the last is co-processed excipients, which we are discussing today, which is basically a mixture. I mean, as I've already mentioned to you, it's a combination of two or more compendial or non-compendial excipients. Now, when they are mixed together, they are designed to physically modify the properties. That means अगर आपने एक लैक्टोस ले लिया और अगर आपने एक पीवीपी बाइंडर ले लिया, दोनों का जो मिक्स करके जो आपको को प्रोसेस्ड एक्सीपेंट मिलता है, the efficacy or the performance of this particular mixture has to be superior than lactose individually and pvp individually. Then only this is called a co-processed excipient. So there is some physical mixture that is happening in between this lactose and PVP, such that your final outcome, your final co-processed excipient is much superior than these individual excipients. Now you have to keep it in mind that these co-processed excipients are only and only physically modified. They are not chemically modified. That means if you are mixing lactose and PVP, there has to be no chemical interaction that happens such that you get an altogether newer molecule or a newer product that you are getting. In this case, if there is any chemical involvement that is happening, then it is not a co-processed excipient. It goes under the new chemical entity or a novel excipient. So there has to be no significant chemical change. There are numerous methods available for co-processing an excipient, like a granulation method, spray drying, melt extrusion, milling method. So I have another slide altogether which shows the numerous processes that could be used for co-process excipient. And again, two very important parameters to remember is one, the mixture has to only be physical. There cannot be any chemical interaction happening between these excipients. And secondly, the end product or the co-process excipient should be far superior in performance, in efficacy, in tableting properties than these individual excipients. Now, coming to the history of co-processed excipients, this is actually, if you see, it's a very old, technology. So, right in 1985 was the first co-processed excipient that came into the market, named as Ludipress. So, Ludipress is nothing but a mixture of a diluent, a mixture of a disintegrant, and a binder. So, this Ludipress has been in the market since 1985. Then came a combination of MCC and calcium carbonate in 1988, followed by cellulose and lactose by Megley, and a silicified microcrystalline cellulose like Prosol. Now, if you see, all of these have evident advantages in their in the final product. Like if I have to say a mixture of MCC and lactose, definitely when you have MCC in the formulation, you require a certain proportion of lactose so that your tabletability is perfect, so that you get a good hardness of these tablets owing to the brittle and those kind of the physical properties that they have on compaction. Next is you have an MCC, which is a silicified MCC called as Prosol by JRS Pharma. Now, what is the advantages of this silicified microcrystalline cellulose? This microcrystalline cellulose inherently has good flow, but if it has to have a very smooth flow, like so that you don't have weight variation, you don't have CU issues, this is silicified with silicas or aerosols, as we call from Evonik. So when you have a glidant that is inherently mixed with this MCC, it forms a better flowable, highly flowable diluent that you can use it in your final formulation. So co-process, in a nutshell, co-process excipients were created largely to solve flowability, compressibility issues, and disintegration potential concerns. Now, the aim of co-processing is combining the particle, that is incorporation of one excipient into the particle structure of another excipient, so that the undesired properties are masked and the improvement in the final efficacy of the product is done. Now, coming to the market overview, what are the market overview and where does co-process excipient stand? So, if we have a comparison or in terms of market size, in terms of the forecast, what we see is right in 2019, the it was 2,000 million, whereas in 2027 we see a growth of 3.5% to dollar 2,600 million. Now, a lot of concerns come in here when we are talking about co-processed excipient. Obviously, it is definitely beneficial for your final formulation, but because it is a new method or it is a co-processed excipient, there are severe regulatory hurdles that we have to clear. Now, Ludipress that we saw, which was established in 1985, it is today widely acceptable because today it is found in the US FDA. Today it is found in the inactive ingredient guidelines, and that is why the customers or the formulators who are using these co-processed excipients are confidently using that. So as more and more co-processed excipients come into the market, it has to be evaluated and it has to be approved or sanctioned by the regulatory bodies for which it has to be used. So obviously there is an increase in regulatory pressure in terms of purity, safety, and standardization of excipients. The large number of drug moieties that are actually coming out of clinical research. If you see, I mean, if you have read about the statistics, almost 80% of the drug molecules that are recently or that are newly getting researched upon falls into BCS class 2 or BCS class 4. That means low solubility, high permeability, or low solubility, low permeability. So, to enhance the bioavailability of these newly researched upon molecules, obviously we need more and more improved excipients that will help to find the final formulation and to help to increase the bioavailability. So, obviously, there is more pressure on formulators to search for new excipients. These co-processed excipients can also be tailor-made to address specific functionality requirements. Like if suppose we are looking at a functionality requirement of increase or targeting of a particular suppose, so we have targeted dosage forms. So suppose we have, I mean, you have a molecule that is showing its efficacy and solubility in the basic pH. So you could always tailor made these excipients such that it will not release at the acidic pH of the stomach, but once it comes into the environment of basic pH, it will dissociate, or it will disintegrate, dissolve, and release the drug. So again, their co-processed excipients may be of a good use. The cost and time consuming method of drug development that actually hampers the growth of the market. So in a nutshell, if we have to see the regulatory perspective, co-processed excipients are yet to find their way into the official monographs. So they are restricted by the global co-processed excipient market growth. So if so these excipients that we see, the lactose monohydrate, the microcrystalline cellulose, all of them have their official monograph. So we are waiting when these co-processed excipients will actually come into the market and make a way into their official monograph, so that the growth of these co-process excipients will be multifolds. Now, advantages of co-processing. So, before going ahead, I would like to tell you that let this be an interactive session. Any doubts that comes up to your mind, feel free to put it in the chat box, and we can always discuss this at a later stage. There may be slides wherein, if you feel I'm going faster, or if you want a repeat of those slide, you could just put down the slide number, and I will be sure to go back to that slide and discuss again. So, advantages of co-processing, of course, rapid disintegration, as we discussed the ODTs. So, if we need something, an advanced excipient or a mixture of excipient that would help you enable faster or a quicker disintegration. Secondly, enhanced compressibility. So the example here is Ludipress. So these mixture of a diluent, of a binder, and of a disintegrant significantly gives more compressibility when you compare it with a raw diluent or with the single diluent. So obviously, enhanced compressibility is an advantage. Improved dilution potential. So your dilution potential means the ability of your blend to take in more API such that your flow is unhampered. So when you say, so selectors from Megle is basically a mixture of 80%, 85% actually MCC and 25% lactose. So when you have 100% microcrystalline cellulose, there is a particular percentage of drug loading that can happen. But if you have a mixture of MCC and lactose at a 75 and 25 ratio, the amount of API that can go into this particular blend is much higher as compared to plain microcrystalline cellulose or plain lactose. So that gives you improved dilution potential with this co-processed excipient. A simple production process to reduce tablet processing significantly. Improved flow properties like the comparison of the microcrystalline cellulose and the silicified MCC that we discussed, that is MCC blended with colloidal silicon dioxide, and affordability and economic method. So these are all the advantages of co-processing. Now you would ask me, how will co-processing or a co-processed excipient be more affordable? This is majorly, if you see at the plant scale, they would have tons and tons of bags that they have stored for a particular batch. So the commercial batch quantities are generally 1 lakh tablets, 10 lakh tablets. So for that, production of 10 lakh tablets, you could imagine the amount of microcrystalline cellulose or the amount of lactose that they would hoard into their inventory. Now, why co-processing excipients or co-processed excipients becomes affordable is they can drastically reduce the inventory. Instead of having 5 or 10 different bags, they could have one simple bag of this co-processed excipient. So that makes it affordable and economically cost effective. Now coming to the techniques to produce co-processed excipient. So there are multiple methods to produce co-processed excipient. Now we have to keep in mind that any method that we are looking here is purely physical. It cannot have a chemical impact, or it cannot form newer bonds, or the functional groups of these molecules cannot get attached to give rise to a new chemistry. So if it gives rise to a newer chemistry, that means, as I mentioned, it will be a newer chemical entity. So here we are only looking at those techniques to produce co-processed excipient that will be physical in nature. The first example is roller compaction. So what is roller compaction in general in tableting also? So there are two rolls which actually counter rotate, and you pass your tablet blend through these rollers. Because of the pressure exerted by the rollers, you get rolls, or you get sheets of compressed output. Now this particular, what happens is, if you have this roller compaction, you put in your two individual excipients that have to be co-processed. By counter rotating rollers, by physical compaction, you get a mixture of these co-processed excipient. So these rolls that you receive, you could always mill it to form a finely free flowing powder to give you a co-processed excipient. So again, the pressure that you're putting is physical in nature. So the infusion or the blend of these excipients are physical in nature, and no chemical reaction actually arises in this particular process. Second is wet granulation. Wet granulation we know is a very common approach, very common process that we use in tableting as well. We granulate it, aqueous granulation, non-aqueous granulation. The major reason why we use aqueous granulation and non-aqueous granulation for tableting is the absence of chemical reaction. If we, form a tablet with wet granulation and there is a mixture or there is a chemistry involved between the API and the excipient, obviously that tablet will not pass its clear its efficacy test. So wet granulation again is purely physical, wherein we have the rapid shear mixer, that is the RMG, or the GPCG, the fluid bed granulator that we call it for top spray granulation. Then we have the HME, which is an hot melt extruder. Now HME again, because I'm assuming you would have heard this in bits and pieces. What is an HME? So HME is basically an instrument wherein you add your excipient, you add your API, and this excipient and API melt at a particular temperature, and they are mixed with shear at this particular temperature. And once they cool down, they give you various shapes. So you could get a star shaped tablet, you could get an elliptical, oval shape, you could get extrudes out of it depending on the die that you have at the end. So this is, the name says hot melt extruder, because you have a heating activity that goes on, because of which you have a melting activity that goes on with shear, and you get an extrude out of it. So it's called a hot melt extruder. Now, how can you use it for co-processing excipient? Very simple. You remove the API, you put 2 or 3 excipients which are, heated at a particular temperature. They mix with each other rapidly, and then on cooling they give you extrudes. This extrudes, of course, could be milled or could be, size reduction can be done to form the freely flowing co-processed excipient. So again, your heating, melting of these excipients allows it to physically get blended with each other to give you a very fine, uniform co-processed excipient. Then you have a spray drying process. Now, just to bring your attention to this, all of these processes are very, very relevant to the pharmaceutical formulation development that we see. So this is not new. This has been used in the industry for formulation development since ages. That has been explored to the co-processed excipient. And an explanation to all of these processes, I'm sure, will be a refresher session for you as well to understand these concepts. So coming to spray drying is a process where you have a solution, a suspension or a dispersion of your 2 excipients in a liquid form, and you spray it at a particular temperature in a particular environment. And the rapid cooling, you spray it at 40 degrees Celsius, and there is a chamber where there is a rapid cooling that is happening, because of which the water in this particle evaporates, and it gives you a dry form of a powder. So this is called a spray drying approach. Then we have roller drying, which is basically an homogeneous solution or a dispersion which are dried in a roller dryer. So we have roller dryers, and this particular homogeneous dispersion or a mixture of these 2 excipients will actually, dry. So the water will get evaporated, and you have a co-processed excipient that is left behind. You have a co-transformation process. So this is basically use of heat or solvent effect to temporarily open up, the particles of the excipient to co-transform with each other. This is not, this is more in terms of the API and excipient. We could term it as a more of a chemical reaction in nature. Then we have a milling process wherein the millers, such as a roller mill, a ball mill, or a hammer mill, are used for the milling process. So again, milling is a subsequent process for roll compaction. It is a subsequent process for roller drying. It is a subsequent process for HME. So this is a milling process. Then you have the melt granulation process, which is basically your excipients are melted, and then there is an addition of another excipient, and then when it comes to room temperature, it congeals, and therefore then you get an uniform co-processed excipient. And then there is a solvent evaporation method. So this solvent evaporation method again is where you have a particular solvent wherein both your excipients are soluble. So suppose you have an IPA, or for that matter water. So if you have 2 excipients that are water soluble, like example lactose monohydrate, and for example a disintegrant. So both of these water soluble excipients can dissolve in water, and then when this water is evaporated, what is left behind is your co-processed excipient of lactose and your disintegrant. So these are how the different co-processed excipients are produced. Now, these are some literature that are based on co-processed excipient. So on the left hand side, I have these co-processed excipient ingredients. What are the ingredients? So this will give you a fair idea of what different excipients can go together in combination to give you a co-processed excipient, the technique that is being used, the advantages, what are the advantages over the individual excipients. So when we see, this is basically a colloidal silicon dioxide and MCC. This was exactly I was referring to as a silicified MCC. So the superior advantages is good flowability, disintegration time, and compressibility. Then we have a co-processed excipient of microcrystalline cellulose and methyl cellulose. So this is very, very essential to taste mask. So if you have a bitter drug and you want to formulate it as an ODT, or you want to formulate it as an effervescent tablet, which you have to put it in water and then drink the water. So obviously you need a taste masking system so that your bitter active can be palatable. So this particular approach of MCC and methyl cellulose can be a good taste masking agent. Then coming to cross-povidone and SSG. So these are basically two super disintegrants that go together. So cross-povidone and SSG are super disintegrants that will help you enhance the disintegrating efficacy of a formulation. So these both of them have good flow property, good compaction, and a good disintegration property. So when you see there are numerous excipients, that are available. So one more important excipient here is a mixture or a co-processed excipient of MCC and mannitol. Now mannitol is completely used. So what is the major usage of mannitol? So mannitol is a very, very quickly disintegrating excipient because it is highly water soluble. Second, mannitol has a negative mouth cooling sensation in the tongue. So what this does is, if it can be used in ODT kind of formulations, it gives you a cooling sensation in the mouth. So these cooling sensations are required for the orally disintegrating films or orally disintegrating tablets, or a buccal kind of a tablet that needs a good flavor, a good palatability in the mouth. Now, this mannitol, the major drawback of this mannitol is compactability. Like you imagine you have a anti-vomiting agent as an active. Okay, so that you give as an ODT because suppose you're traveling or you're traveling by bus into those steep hills, and you want to vomit, there is a sensation of nausea. So you have this anti-vomiting pill ODT. You keep it in your mouth, and there is mannitol. So that mannitol, which is like 80-90% of mannitol in that formulation, is very, very difficult to compress if you look at the pharmaceutical point of it. So obviously you need MCC that will help to give it strength and to make a finished formula. So this is where this co-processed excipient of MCC and mannitol go together, wherein you could use this co-processed excipient, this anti-vomiting API, and could make a finished formulation. So better compactability and lubricant sensitivity are its major advantages of MCC and mannitol. I just leave this slide for a couple of more seconds so that you could go through the other co-processed excipients as well. The melt granulation method, the solvent evaporation method, direct compression method, numerous methods. If you have any doubts, please put it up across the chat. We could always take it up after the end of this session. Okay. So moving ahead, we have seen numerous advantages of the co-processed excipient: the efficacy, the performance, the cost effectiveness, all of these. Now, obviously, when you are looking at a co-processed excipient, there could be some limitations. So, coming to the first limitation, it is basically unable to adjust the ratio of the excipient. Now, these co-processed excipient are of a particular ratio. Like I mentioned, in 85% of an MCC and a 25% of a lactose monohydrate. We have another co-processed excipient like Supertap 40 LL from DFE Pharma, which is basically 95% of anhydrous lactose and 5% lactitol. Now, these are good to go for most of the active pharmaceutical ingredients, most of the APIs. Now, there would be certain APIs which would require a higher proportion of MCC to better suit it into a formulation or for stability. Like there could be certain excipient or certain formulation where you require a higher than 25% of lactose monohydrate, maybe to adjust the disintegration or to adjust the dissolution. In that case, this co-process excipient may be a challenge, or you require further optimization with these co-processed excipient. So the ratio that is already present works well maybe with 90% of the molecules, but for certain 10% of the actives, you may need to readjust the ratio, or then you go for a individual excipient process. Secondly, and the major limitation that I personally see of a co-processed excipient is that the pharmacopoeia does not recognize co-processed excipient as adjuvants. So unless and until we have a pharmacopoeial monograph of this co-processed excipient, it is going to be difficult for the formulators, like, or for the companies also, to take up these co-processed excipient, because then they will have additional questions from the regulatory agents, like, what is the safety, what is the toxicity, how will you establish that there is no chemical bonding that has been formed. So you need to be ready to answer all of these questions if you're using a co-processed excipient. Now this is where exactly, distribution companies or supplier companies like IMCD comes into picture. So IMCD are distributors of these co-processed excipients, wherein we carry regulatory knowledge, we carry the technical knowledge, we carry the documentary knowledge, and will be able to help the formulation scientist to do a better formulation development. Coming to certain examples of co-processed excipients, MCC based. So these are purely microcrystalline cellulose based. So you have numerous supplier like IFF, Megle, JRS Pharma, Kerry. So they have these different brand names, which are basically a composition of MCC and guar gum, MCC and mannitol, MCC and lactose, maybe a combination of MCC, maize starch as a binder, and lactose as another diluent. So numerous application, numerous thought process that has gone into it with different application, and these are the different functions that it carries. It could be a filler binder. So this is basically an all-in-one excipient. So it has a microcrystalline cellulose as a diluent, it has a colloidal silicon dioxide as a glidant, it has a sodium starch glycolate as a disintegrant, and it has an SSF, sodium stearyl fumarate, as a lubricant. So this is marketed as an all-in-one excipient that JRS Pharma markets. So depending on your requirement of the formulation, you could definitely go ahead and use these particular co-processed excipients. Then these are again some co-processed excipients which are MCC based, which are matrix type of tablets or a dry binder and a diluent. Then we have these co-processed excipients which are lactose based. So lactose is your key ingredient, but along with lactose, to modify the efficacy, to modify the advantages, it has been mixed with Collidon 30 and Collidon CL. So Collidon CL from BSF is a disintegrant, and Collidon 30 from BSF is actually a binder. So you have a mixture of diluent, binder, disintegrant. Now what is missing is your API and a lubricant. So you just mix API, you dry mix it, and then you had magnesium stearate, mix it. So this gives you a ready to use blend for compression. So this is under the brand name Ludipress. Then, as I was mentioning, DFE Pharma, we have Supertap 40 LL, which is a mixture of anhydrous lactose and lactitol, which is basically filler with improved compactability. Then from Megle, you have Ritalac, Starlac, Microcelac, which is again a mixture of lactose MCC, lactose HPMC, lactose and MCC and maize starch. Then we have SD lactose and MCC in different ratios, 90-10, 75-25. So these are the different examples with different functions that these co-processed excipients give. Then we have these co-processed excipients mannitol based. So mannitol is a mainstay excipient when we talk about ODTs or any rapid disintegration tablets. So if you see, most of these co-processed excipients which are mannitol based are for ODTs. So direct compression ODT, ODT platform, direct compression binder in ODTs, OD matrix mix, binder filler in ODT. So this is basically mannitol plus disintegrant. Mannitol with GMS, which is basically increasing the lubrication properties. Then we have mannitol plus a sweetener plus a glidant plus a disintegrant. That is obviously, if it's an ODT, it needs to have a sweetener to give you a good mouth feel. So these are the different grades that are available, mannitol based. Then these are the numerous other co-processed excipients available in the market for direct compression as a binder, as a pH independent sustained release polymer, that is from Polydon SR from DSF. These are some co-processed excipients for oral liquids. Now, of course, oral solids are the mainstay in the market, but we also have certain co-processed excipients for oral liquids, which is basically a mixture of microcrystalline cellulose and sodium CMC. So, sodium carboxymethyl cellulose is basically a viscosity modifying agent. And when we are talking about oral suspensions, obviously suspension formulation need to have a particular thickening effect, need to have a particular viscosity, so that your suspended particles don't settle down on stability. Now suspensions, of course, not going into the details of suspensions, but the stability of suspension is very very crucial for the reproducible dosing and for the efficacy of that suspension formulation. So a good viscosity regulator and a modifier is very very essential, and that is where we have a mix of MCC and sodium CMC under the brand name Avicel RC591, Avicel CL611 from IFF. Then you also have a stabilizer with MCC and sodium CMC with GRS Pharma. Certain co-process excipients for topicals. So topical systems are basically those semi-solid systems that are to be applied on your skin. This could be either for a local application, or this could be for a systemic effect, like absorption for a systemic effect. So again, in topicals as well, you have Avicel RC591, which is a viscosity modifier, eliminates lengthy hydration times. Again, topical system is a very broad term. So one part of the topical system is on the skin. Another part of topical system is also the nasal sprays, the pulmonary sprays, the topical sprays, the suppositories. So all of these dosage forms also, fall under the broad category of topicals. And then we have something from Dow, which is called as a Carbovax PEG 540 blend, which is basically a mixture of polyethylene glycol. So polyethylene glycols are water washable, water soluble bases. And when we see PEG 32, they are high molecular weight PEGs which are solid in nature. And you have PEG 6, which is a liquid polyethylene glycol, like a PEG 400. So when you mix both of them, PEG 32 and PEG 6, at a particular ratio or at different ratios, you get a final blend of polyethylene glycol of different stiffness. So if you increase the ratio of PEG 6, which is liquid in nature, you get a watery kind of a system. Whereas if you increase the concentration of PEG 32, which is solid in nature, you will get a semi-solid stiff kind of an base. So this further can be used, where the API can be dispersed in this base and can be used, for a semi-solid system, an ointment system, a suppository system, or even to increase the viscosity of a liquid formulations. So these are some, co-process excipients for oral liquids and topicals. Of course, oral solids has been, researched upon, and a lot of activity has gone ahead in the oral solid segment. But for liquids and topicals as well, more there are excipients that are coming up ahead for liquids and topical system. I believe this is my last slide. So, having a little talk on the regulatory perspective, this particular co-processed excipient does not require a toxicological data. Why? Because your individual excipients already have their toxicological data, and because there is no chemical interaction or there is no chemical new moiety formed, you don't need to have a toxicological data. So that is a very positive point why the FDA authorities must take up co-process excipient seriously and must give it a place in the monograph. Secondly, co-process excipients could be considered as grass. Grass is generally regarded as safe. So, because your individual excipients are again grass listed, they are again safe. It is very, it is right to say that these co-process excipients are also considered as grass. They are yet not described as official monographs, but very soon they should be, so that more and more convenient excipients can be used. But there are certain co-process excipients that are already in the official monograph, like the silicified MCC, that is the Avicel series that I was just mentioning, Avicel RC591, which is MCC and sodium carboxymethyl cellulose, dispersible cellulose, compressible sugar, all of this. And then there is a need of a relevant analytical method to prove the absence of chemical changes. Now, obviously, we have been talking about these individual excipients not having a chemical bond. But how will you prove it? How will you suppose melt through the HME process, have a lactose and MCC, melt it, mix it together, and then get a free flowing MCC lactose combination? But obviously, your regulatory person or the FDA will ask you, what is the guarantee that this MCC and lactose have not formed a chemical bond? So definitely you need an analytical method that shows that 75% is still in the pure MCC form, 25% is still in the pure lactose form, and they have not formed a chemical bond. So this is again something that has to be worked upon, and more newer analytical methods are coming up in the market. So they have to be used to analyze these co-processed excipients. Future perspective, again, I mean, this is just a summary, or a final conclusion slide, wherein obviously we have a pipeline of newer excipients which is very narrow, and we have certain amount of disadvantages with the existing excipients. So we need new and new excipients that have to be used in the formulation to achieve the right bioavailability, to achieve the right targeting, to achieve the right kind of stability in the formulation. The pressure to speed up formulation and production process is immense in the pharmaceutical market. New formulation technologies, new production machineries are always on the go. Like if you would have known, newer, like the nanotechnological formulations are coming up in the market, like niosomes, liposomes. So obviously, for newer technologies, you need newer excipients. You can't use the older excipients for newer formulations. Way into the official monograph, opportunity for development and use of single multifunctional excipient. Again, excipients are also being co-processed directly with the APIs. Now, for example, you have an API which has extremely poor flow. So everything of this API becomes a challenge, right from dispensing to transferring it. So because it has very poor flow, if you are going to dispense or weigh 2 kilos of API in a container, and if you are going to then transfer it to the mixer, what will happen is, from that 2 kilo, you will have a significant amount of wastage of that API in the container. And again, from this mixer, you are going to put it into a granulating equipment, and then to the processing. So in every particular equipment, you're losing some amount of APIs, and APIs are extremely expensive. So to curb all that, there is a new process that is going on, which is a co-processing or a physical blend of API with a free flowing excipient, so that this wastage can be minimized. Co-process excipients for better physicochemical property and targeted drug delivery. So targeted drug delivery is something, as we mentioned, one is a pH targeting, definitely. Second type of targeting is also regional specific targeted, like brain targeted drug delivery, or a liver or a cancer targeted drug delivery. So again, here we need newer excipients that would be very specific to those cells, or those kind of liver or the heart or the brain that is required for targeting. So again, here all of these are perspectives where these co-process excipients stand a chance in the future. And understanding the growth of the pharmaceutical market, understanding the growth of the excipient market, I am sure that these co-process excipients will find a way in the usage in the pharmaceutical market. With that, I'd like to end this session. Another just a gist of what IMCD does for IMCD academic partnership. We are always available. We are always open for gift samples of excipients for your research project. If you have a good research hypothesis, research idea in mind, and your guide or your mentor actually approves of it, you could always write to me, write to us for gift samples of excipients. We could have collaborative projects, like just like we mentioned, having a comparative data of a co-processed excipient with an individual excipient, or any of your newer formulations wherein you would need collaboration, wherein we could supply excipients, you could take it up in your research lab for analysis. So those kind of collaborative projects, IMCD is always open. And we also have a yearly or a 6 monthly internship opportunities. So this majorly goes for the master students, wherein we have internship opportunities for students in the IMCD lab. So IMCD also has a pharmaceutical technical center, which is our application lab in Santa Cruz, Mumbai. So here we are a fully fledged lab for oral solids as well as topicals. So any kind of development process or needs to be done, we could always liaise, collaborate, and take it up ahead. With that, I'll end this session. Thank you very much for this opportunity to interact with all of you all. I would like to, thank the faculty. I know Dr. Prashant since a long time, so thank you very much, sir, for this opportunity. I am open to take up any questions that comes my way. Anything in the chat box, please feel free.
Ma'am, thank you so much. We have questions here in the chat box. Which co-process excipients are approved by the FDA currently?
Okay. So basically, at the moment, not many go process excipients are approved. But I have to say that the silicified MCC, which has been in the market since quite a long time, I mean, many, many years. So this silicified MCC has a USP monograph. So that means it has been approved by the FDA. Then we have the dispersible sugars, and we have certain combinations of the gum of these Avicel RC fina and one, as I was mentioning, the microcrystalline cellulose and the sodium CMC. So this is approved for oral suspensions, for topicals, so those kind of formulations. So not many, but again we see that the FDA approves or puts up into their list of IIG only when some formulator actually uses it. So many formulations or many developments are happening with co-processed excipients. Maybe in a couple of years, when the FDA actually sanctions that product, it will come up in the FDA site that it has been approved.
One more is there. Whether the cost of the formulation will be increased due to co-processed excipients and also the time required.
Okay. So definitely, so this is a very specific. I mean, there's a very specific answer. It purely depends on the API that you're using. So if you have a very regular API, again like a paracetamol, then using a co-processed excipient may not make a lot of sense, because it's a very it has been in the market for so long. But at the same time, if you have a very challenging molecule like suppose a loratadine, which has a very poor bioavailability, now, how will you increase the bioavailability of this particular active? This is by use of certain excipients that will give you a good bioavailability enhancement properties. At the same time, loratadine is extremely fluffy. So if you need to make it freely flowable, if you need a good compaction, if you need a good stability for loratadine, you need to use excipients that will come together and give it a complete holistic enhancement of its portfolio. Now, so it depends completely. The costing will completely depend on what kind of API you have to develop. That is one part of your question. And second part of your question, the time required will certainly be less, because generally what we think is from the R&D perspective. So R&D perspective, we just have say a 2,000 tablet batch or a 5,000 tablet batch. So the time is not very important for us to evaluate. But when it goes to the plant, they have 10 lakh ka batch size, and for that 10 lakh ka batch size, if every process of like right from dispensing, suppose example we have two cases. One is we have five excipients, one is we have just API and one excipient. So the dispensing for 10 lakh tablets for six excipients, matlab API plus five excipients, API plus two excipients, will be very very different. You will need one entire day for only dispensing with all your documentation, the QA approvals, all of these put together. So dispensing, if it takes so much time, every process that it goes, dry mixing, then RMG granulation, then drying, then lubrication, then you take it for tableting. So if you have to undergo all of these processes for different excipients or different co-process, then definitely the time required with co-process excipients will be very very less. So that is one of the very important advantages of co-processed excipients.
Okay, one more question is there. What is advancement of co-process excipient in continuous manufacturing?
So that's a very, very good question. Actually, just like co-process excipient is a new frontier, continuous manufacturing is also something that is coming up very rapidly. And a lot of bigger pharmaceutical companies are, working into continuous manufacturing. And the initial reports or the initial study says that co-processed excipients work well in continuous manufacturing. So continuous manufacturing setup is such that you initiate the process and finally you have the blend with you. So entirely it goes into the same process. Now, if you have a mixture of excipients that are readily available for you, that will reduce your time of all of these individual processing. So definitely co-process excipient will be very beneficial in continuous manufacturing. So of course, regulatory requirement is the supreme part in co-process excipient. But once if that gets its clarity, definitely these excipients, co-process excipients, can be used in continuous manufacturing as well.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Thank you. I think questions are over. Um, thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable guidance on co-processed excipients. Now I request you to kindly accept the certificate as a token of love.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Now I request. Wait a minute. One more question is there.
Okay. So
Um,
adhesive, I read the question. I read the question. So adhesive as such, I mean, for topical delivery, there are no many co-process excipient at the moment in the market. But because sodium CMC does MCC and sodium CMC combination does have a kind of a mucoadhesive properties. So abyssal RC fine and one can be explored for its mucoadhesion properties, not necessarily a topical, maybe a buccal system or those kind of systems. Mucoadhesion can be there. But apart from that, not many co-process excipients are available as an adhesive. You have the conventional ones, but not many on the co-processed front.
okay, one more is there. Is there any stability problems can occur?
Good question. So we have to think on all these lines. But essentially, the entire narrative of co-processed excipients goes by that if their individual excipients do not have stability issues, then these co-processed excipients or these excipients coming together without a chemical reaction or without a chemical change will also not have stability issues. But if your API has an issue with MCC or a lactose individually, and if you're again using a co-process excipient with that particular excipient, then definitely we would see challenges of that API with those formulations or those co-process excipient. But if there is no, if there is, you have the pre-formulation studies with individual excipients, then even if you use a co-process excipient, the stability won't be high.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much. Now I hand over my screen to Dr. DM Shinkar for delivering the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone present here. Dear participants, on behalf of Gokhale Education Society, Sir Dr. M.S. Gosavi, College of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, and its entire fraternity, I, Dr. D.M. Shinkar, the coordinator of webinar, feel immense pleasure to propose a vote of thanks. I express my sincere gratitude to today's distinguished speakers, Ms. Kritika Pardeshi, Assistant Professor, Sandeep University, and Dr. Sita V G, Assistant Manager, Technical Services, IMCD India Private Limited, Mumbai, who has spared their valuable time from their busy schedule and shared expertise on architecting pharmaceutical dosage forms and co-process excipients. I would especially thank our Honorable Dr. Mrs. Dipti Deshpande ma'am, Secretary GES Nasik, for her persistent support and the guiding force for every new step forward. I would take this opportunity to express my deep regards to our beloved Honorable Sri Shailesh Gosavi, Establishment Director, Gokhale Education Society, the backbone of our institution, for his everlasting guidance and moral support. A special thanks to Captain of our ship, respected Dr. Sunil V. Amrutkar, Principal, for his encouragement and motivation to arrange such events. I extend my gratitude to Dr. Prashantel Pingle, IQAC in charge, for his guidance and support to make this webinar successful. My deep sense of thanks and appreciation goes to all the participants who were live with us and attended the webinar with great enthusiasm and made it a great success. Last but not the least, I would thank organizing team working hard for the past few days to make this webinar successful. Thank you everyone once again for making it a grand success, and have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable time.
Thank you so much. Good day.